Hey everybody, Maurer here, and today we have another relatively quiet news day, but we're going to be talking about a couple of things in Germany, one with Giga Berlin, one with Volkswagen. Then we've got a couple of software updates to talk about, news on Tesla in China, news on the Tesla Semi, and Tesla's legal counsel. Then we've got a few international updates and a couple other things. Tougher day for Tesla stock today, finishing down 4.1% to $1,109.03. Nasdaq was also down on the day, about 0.5%. No further updates yesterday in terms of stock selling. We didn't see any additional Form 4s, but as a reminder, they do have 2 days to publish those. So if there was any selling on Monday, we could still see Form 4s as late as tomorrow, Wednesday. All right, first here is a bit of news on Tesla in Germany. So this is actually being posted by IG Metall. If you're unfamiliar, IG Metall is the biggest union in Germany. They've got about 2.2 million members, represent workforces for Volkswagen, Daimler, BMW. They work pretty closely with the UAW here in the US, and that 2.2 million members, that's about 8% or so of the total German workforce. Today, IG Metall posted an update on their website about starting a Works Council election for Tesla's Giga Berlin. They write in translation, quote, "Even before the first Tesla rolled off the production line in Grünheide, 7 employees of the new Gigafactory took the first step towards the Works Council election on Monday evening, November 22nd, end quote. From here, I do get a little bit confused about exactly where they're at in the process. They write, quote, "The prerequisite for effective co-determination in the company is that the Works Council sees itself as representing the interests of the entire workforce and also represents them. Since the Tesla workforce is still in the process of building up, and so far only around 1 in 6 has been hired, it makes sense not to let election day take place right away. Those hired so far often have managerial and coordinating tasks. The electoral board, to be elected on November 29th, will decide on this question," end quote. So at least to me, the wording there is a little bit confusing. Maybe that's because of translation, but I was able to find the general process for starting a Works Council from Tech Workers Berlin. They say that the first step is calling a workers' assembly, then electing an election committee, and then electing the Works Council. So with that context, they seem to be at that first step there of calling a workers' assembly, and then they will plan to elect an election committee on November 29th, and that election committee would then determine when they want to do the electing of the Works Council. Something that, again, I'm not clear on from this Berlin Tech Workers framework is what sort of percentages are needed to do any of this, if any are. Basically, they just say that to call a workers' assembly, you need 3 workers who are eligible to vote, but there doesn't seem to be anything about a certain percentage of workers being in favor of this or anything. So I'm not sure that there being a workers' assembly is any sort of indication that this has significant support from Berlin employees. And I'm also not sure if it even needs significant support. So we may have to turn to some of our German listeners that may have a bit more experience with this process to help us out in the comments today. And it's also probably worth noting that a Works Council is not necessarily the exact same thing as a union, but to be fair, after doing a decent amount of reading on this, I'm not sure I could fully explain the differences. The general intent of both seems to be to increase employee representation. I guess if I were to take a shot at the difference, a Works Council to me seems like it's more formed on an individual basis. So for example, this would just be a Tesla Works Council. It wouldn't necessarily tie up to any policies from Volkswagen, but obviously with IG Metall involved as a union, they are working to shape policy across a bunch of different companies. So at least to me, it seems like the lines are a little bit arbitrary and maybe not all that consequential in terms of making the distinction. And then I guess another difference that I saw is that a Works Council wouldn't have a fund, so there would be no dues. The cost really ends up being on the employer because the Works Council coordination essentially happens on company time. Anyway, the other little piece of information that we have on this topic is from Autoblog. They say that IG Metall has said that applicants of Tesla have told it that Tesla is, quote, "offering pay 20% below the collectively bargained wages offered at other German automakers," end quote. But then they continue on to say that, quote, "Tesla is also shaking up conventional German contracts by offering packages with stock options and bonuses rather than predetermined holiday pay," end quote. So not too surprising. Obviously, wages are not the only thing that should be considered in a compensation plan. So without more information, it's not possible to tell how competitive Tesla's compensation is, but if it weren't competitive, then why would anybody go work there? Anyway, I guess we'll just have to continue to keep following this and hopefully in the meantime learn a little bit more about how all of this ends up getting structured and what impacts there may or may not be to Tesla. All right, next up, we're going to stick in Germany here for a second because we do have an update on Herbert Diess and just the ongoing conversations about his future with Volkswagen. Reuters today is reporting that Volkswagen Supervisory Board will meet this evening to discuss that future. However, 3 sources did tell them that it would be unlikely for any final decision to be made tonight. Further talks would be expected, but I mean, this is the third or fourth time we've talked about this topic, and it seems likely that where there is smoke, there's at least a little bit of fire happening there. Reuters sources also told them that an agreement between the supervisory committee, quote, could depend on whether Diess agrees to change his management style, end quote. So, I mean, this is exactly what we just got done discussing with Alex Potter. It seems pretty clear to us that Diess is at least attempting to push things in the right direction and at least understands where things are going. But there's a lot of people that just don't want to hear that, and Volkswagen as an entity may be reflecting that. I think I'd be pretty surprised if Diess were just straight up fired or something like that, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if his role were diminished. All right, next up here, we do officially have waypoints added. We had seen that in some of the source software code earlier, but we now have that in software version 2021.40.6. So this is separate from the FSD beta 10.5 version, which is also just rolled out, and that does not have the waypoints yet. Nevertheless, exciting to finally see this feature added after a lot of clamoring for it over the years by customers. Trevor from Tesla Owners Online shared a quick video of that in action yesterday, and some of the functionality I think can still be improved, but definitely a nice start. I did mention FSD Beta 10.5, so I did have the opportunity to take that out for the first time today. That'll probably be tomorrow's episode, so I do apologize to audio listeners. You'll have to flip over to YouTube tomorrow for that. And that is unless we do get some urgent news, in which case I'll try to do just a normal episode. Next, just a really quick piece of news for Tesla in China. We probably should have discussed this yesterday, but Elon did tweet saying that the Plaid Model S would probably be coming to China in March. And I did get a couple of questions just asking if that meant from Shanghai or from Fremont. And just to be clear, that would be from Fremont, would be imported into China. Next is a quick update on the Tesla Semi. Remember, we've been talking about Pepsi maybe getting a small test fleet of Tesla Semis somewhat soon, as well as the build plans for a Megacharger on a Pepsi site. And today, per Marco RP Tesla on Twitter, we do actually have that permit for the Megacharging site. A couple of interesting dates on here. So the application date was back in April, and this permit is then issued as of yesterday. Probably the only other interesting thing on here is the valuation, which is listed at $334,000, which happens to be the same number as the square feet. So kind of just a symbolic $1 per square foot there. Oh, and then maybe one other interesting detail in the job description, it does say EV charging installation, but also says including a battery storage system. Delivering that level of power definitely seems to make sense to have energy storage on site, and that seems to be what Tesla intends here. Next is a small legal update. I think Bloomberg was the first to notice this, though this was technically announced a month ago on LinkedIn by Tesla's new managing legal counsel. So that would be David Meisler, I think that's how you would pronounce it, who had formerly been working with the SEC's trial unit. So yeah, a little bit of fun there with Elon Musk's back and forth with the SEC, but relatively common to see those sort of paths back and forth. All right, last few things here. We've got a pretty significant infrastructure update from England. They have announced that all new homes and buildings, such as supermarkets and workplaces, will be required to install electric vehicle charge points from next year. I'm not sure exactly if apartment complexes would fall into that requirement. I hope that they do, because I think that would be a huge win. I think generally it's a bit easier to get charging into a home rather than an apartment, so hopefully they included that. But they do also say that as well as new homes and non-residential buildings, those undergoing large-scale renovations, which leaves them with over 10 parking spaces, will also be required to install electric vehicle charge points. So it should be a win for EV adoption, and I'm sure we'll continue to see things like this all over the world. Next, we'll move over to Japan, which according to Nikkei Asia is raising their purchase incentives for electric vehicles to be as high as 800,000 yen, or about $7,000, though it will still include plug-in hybrids, and there are still incentives for fuel cell vehicles, which actually can be even more significant. Interesting to see that move, though, especially given Toyota's seeming lack of interest in EVs. All right, lastly today, we've got an update on the all-electric Hummer. GM has announced that they have moved into the true production stage for this vehicle, and that first deliveries are currently expected to be sometime in December. So this will be a nice change to see the leader in US EVs go from producing no EVs to producing some. Beg your pardon on my flippancy there. Anyway, you may have seen a story about the Tesla bot too. That seemed to be the other thing, catching headlines, just more job postings. We've actually talked about that a couple times in the past, so I don't really view that as news. So that is where we'll leave it for today. Again, tomorrow's video, probably FSD beta. If nothing urgent happens, I'll be off on Thursday for Thanksgiving, and then kind of TBD on Friday. Just got a lot of traveling and want to make sure that I have some time to spend with the people that I care about, and hopefully you do too. but I'll be keeping an eye out and ready to go if needed. Anyway, make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast, and I will see you tomorrow, at least for that video, for the Wednesday, November 24th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.